Welcome to the Impact Revolution channel. It's a big pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for your time. How are you doing today?
Not doing too bad. Just running around trying to get things done. So
Arranging your next trip to Africa to live with the tribes.
yeah, we'll see. I still need to get a ticket back. I haven't managed to secure that low fare yet. But hopefully there's hope yet.
Okay, good. I'm sure it will be fine. So, Nick, I would like to start with some a couple of personal questions just to get everybody knows you a bit better, and then
Yes.
later we can go to the professional, more experience based question, right?
Yeah,
So,
sure.
okay, great, thank you. So, Nick, how someone who really admires you and respects you very much will define who is Nick?
Oh man, I don't know. I
You
guess
can think of someone, and
I'd
use
like
their own
to.
words.
I guess I'd like to think that people would define me as passionate and creative and persistent. At
Okay.
least for the good qualities. Although, I mean, the trick is that sometimes your good qualities are often your bad qualities. So I can be overly passionate, get too worked up about stuff. I can be too persistent and not know when to give up. And my creativity causes me to like run off on lots of different tangents. So
All
your
right.
greatest strengths are often your greatest weaknesses.
Okay, fair enough. Very good. So passionate, creative, and consistent. I like that. I like that, Nick. Thank you. Now, I wanted to ask you as well, a personal one. If I ask you what was your happiest moment in your life, which one comes to your mind? Which moment?
Oh man, I'm just thinking back like a week ago. I was at the not the happiest of my life, but it was a happy moment. I was the Cretaceous Paleogene boundary, the happiest recent one, and I found a fossil, an ammonite, from the very end of the age of dinosaurs, like 66 million years ago, right before the asteroid hit.
Wow.
And I was trying to chip it out of the rock, and someone lent me a hammer, a rock hammer, and I hit it, and a crack went right through the fossil, and I freaked out. And the rock fell away, and it beautifully exposed this coil of this little ammonite. And it was just gorgeous, and I was just so happy. It was just like
Wow.
I was just like a little kid, and like, oh, it's so pretty. So that's I think the happiest thing that's happened in recently. And
All
then
right.
some papers come out, but that's kind of anticlimactic. It's like I'm expecting them to come out. There's a lot of hassle and stress about like coordinating it and getting the proofs done. So it's like, okay, you're kind of expecting it, but I guess it was that unexpected find of this beautiful fossil, and it just popped open. It was so pretty. I was really, yeah,
Wow.
at least
Wow.
recently.
65 million years ago, you say, yeah?
Yeah, 66, right before the asteroid. It was one of the last ammonites on
Wow.
Earth. And so
Wow.
you're there at the moment everything changed for the world overnight. Is like, there's one world before, there's an asteroid, everything is different afterwards. And so that was pretty amazing. I guess another recent one, I guess, in the last year is I went to see the Sistine Chapel for the first time. And oh, are you okay there?
Yeah.
Let's check the email and
Hi,
see.
Nick. Yes. Can you hear me?
Are you there?
I'm really sorry. I don't know what
Yeah,
happened. I don't know
yeah,
what
yeah.
happened. If it was my internet that went down or whatever.
Perfect.
Anyway, we're back. Yes.
Oh, I guess the other thing I was going to say is I went to I went to Italy recently. I've gotten interested in history, ancient history, and so I was like running around Rome and seeing all these ruins. I booked a tour to see like the Sistine Chapel, and I
Wow.
didn't have anything to eat today all day, and didn't have a lot of coffee. And And I had a lot of coffee, not a lot of food, and I was just like, we were running around, we're seeing all this stuff, and it's just this kind of crazy, chaotic thing in the Vatican Museum.
Okay.
And then at the very end of it, after a couple hours, walked into the Sistine Chapel, and it kind of prefaced this. I've been studying a bit about the evolution of artwork and trying to connect hunter-gatherer artwork and rock art and things like this. So I'm going to see the Sistine Chapel, one of the most famous pieces of art in the world, and this, and pinnacle, of art history. And you just kind of walk in, you look up, and you see this thing above you, and it was like a full-on religious experience. It was like, I mean, I'm not a very religious person, but it felt just like I'd been touched by something, and just this amazing sense of just like being in the presence of something bigger than yourself, of just seeing this amazing piece of human creativity that's played such a role in human history, and also at the same time, this culmination of all these various historical and creative impulses culminating in this work of extraordinary creativity by Michelangelo. And it's kind of, it's sort of this monument to creativity. It's a scene of creation. And it was just like, again, it was a religious experience, which was really weird, not being a religious person. Almost like a moment of conversion, like, as a
like
all
very
eroded,
spiritual, yeah, something
and
that is bigger than yourself, that you say, yeah.
transported by the sense of just like, I don't know, oneness with the universe, and just like the sense of like, the extraordinary, the beauty, the majesty, the ruin of humanity is just kind of all etched out on the ceiling. It was just amazing. And then I went to the gift shop and I bought a Sistine Chapel mug. So it's like,
very nice.
from the sacred to the very, commercial, like, oh, I get a piece of merch. I was really, it was I don't know. It's like, I think it's a valuable thing, is going and traveling a bit and seeing the world and seeing some of these great things while I can.
Regarding this, that you've been traveling around quite a lot, and you've been you're born in USA, then you study in USA in different places, and then in Canada, and now you're in UK. I wanted to ask you now, we're going to start to the questions that are more impactful, or let's say for the redefining of the business mindset that we are doing here. What is, if you were to die tomorrow, I know this is a big dramatic, Nick, what is the last impactful message that you will leave to the world based on all these experiences that you have so far?
Oh my God, I just like, I guess it would be, it's just like, I mean, I guess it kind of maybe gets a bit back to the Sistine Chapel, but like, it's, or maybe even the end Cretaceous mass extinction. It's extraordinary that we're here. It really is. If you look back at the history of the universe, the history of life on Earth, it is an extraordinary set of coincidences that leads to our existence on this planet, that led to me being here or you being here. And we are privileged to exist at this time and in this place and in this world with all these things. And which is not to say that we don't have our tragedies to deal with, and we don't have nonsense and things that, are difficult and things to overcome. But it's just like, the world is a spectacular place in a lot of ways, and we have one shot at it, and try and make the most of it. And there's a saying by, I mean, this kind of gets to the issue of what if you die tomorrow? Well, Hillel the Elder had this saying, if not now, when? And it took me a long time to figure that out. Like, if you ever read the book Getting Things Done, which I highly recommend, it's a good book about getting things done, but maybe not about the meaning of life. If you think of it in that lens, if not now, when, like a to-do list, well, don't put off your chores that you could do today and you could do them tomorrow. Like, there's the 3-minute rule, anything you can do in 3 minutes, or do it now and get it off your table. So I was kind of thinking of if not now, when, in terms of this sort of getting things done mode of being productive, get things done so don't let your problems pile up. And then I realized that was not what Hillel was talking about. And it happened because I lost a colleague. I lost some friends, and it just made me realize, you don't have forever. And if you procrastinate the important stuff, one of two things will quite likely end up happening. One possibility is you always say, well, tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'll do that trip I always wanted to do. I'll start the business. I'll write my novel.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to 70 or 80, and it's still tomorrow that'll happen, and it just never happens.
Yeah.
That's one possibility, and that's the optimistic one. The less optimistic one is you might not get that much. Maybe you got 40 or 50 years, and tomorrow, okay, well, I'm 46, but it'll happen when I'm 47. Well, that might or might not happen. We don't have as much time as we think we have, and we may have even less than the average. So it's just kind of like you gotta.
Nothing is guaranteed. Yeah.
Nothing is guaranteed, which is not to say go out and gamble everything away tomorrow. Put it all in tickets and go to Vegas. But I guess it's like what's important to you, and do those things. And so partly like
That's a big message. That's a big message. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Big question on me. I'm working.
I
I
love
guess.
it. It is true. I completely agree with you. We need to be more courageous to pursue the passions that we feel inside us. And also, as you say, we are
Yeah.
so privileged to be alive and to be here in this moment after so many things. Well, you know better than anyone, right? You're an evolutionary biologist,
Yeah.
so you know what happens in Earth, and how lucky we are, and what
Yeah.
are the odds that we are
Yeah.
existing today. Yeah.
And this is, I guess, the other thing I would say is that, that like life is always giving you opportunities. And I try to explain this to my students, and I try to keep it in mind myself because I can get sometimes in a pessimistic mode or whatever. But like the trick is life is always throwing you opportunities, but they might not be the ones you want. They might not be the ones you expect, but sometimes they're going to be far better than anything you want out there. And life is full of opportunities, and you got to seize them. But the best thing that could possibly happen to you, or is likely to happen to you, you probably won't anticipate it. Our imagination doesn't capture all the amazing things out there in the world, and so you kind of gotta be open to that, and you kind of want to. If you get too fixated on one thing, I've seen this happen to people with jobs where they don't get the job they want, and then they're kind of bummed out or pissed off or whatever. And then a couple months later, they get a job that's way better. And it's just kind of like, if and in a way they lucked out by not getting that other job, because then they got something even better. And so I find this with fossils. Like I go out looking, I hope I get, something really cool, and I don't find it. The thing I'm really looking for, I don't find. But then something else comes up. Like I got a duck-billed dinosaur from Africa. And it would never have occurred, which is an extraordinary thing because they really shouldn't exist there. And so I never would have thought to want something like that. I couldn't have wanted it because I couldn't even conceive that it existed. And I found this amazing thing that what the hell is a duck-billed dinosaur doing in Africa? But it's there. And then you get it okay, I'm writing a paper on this sucker. So I think the thing is that life is always,
and I think it's now it's totally, I really believe it, and I really agree with you. It's full of opportunities, and nowadays it's even more, right, because of the internet and the globalization and the technology that we have.
And there's crazy stuff the whole pandemic thing sucked and the lockdown sucked, but I tried to keep that mentality, and sometimes it's hard, and it's like part of me didn't want to do a sabbatical forever. It's like, okay, well, I'm on sabbatical now, but I'm sabbatical in my apartment, or I'm in sabbatical at the, outdoors eating at the working at the coffee shop. And so I tried to treat the whole lockdown thing as a sabbatical and find the opportunities. Yeah. And again, it's easier said than done. But again, you kind of gotta, turn them. I mean, I don't know.
I think it's as you say. Sometimes we get things that we may don't want, or we don't think we want, but it has a purpose, Or for me, I always see kind of the purpose. It's like the universe is helping us, or is making us to see things in another way, or to appreciate. And finally, I think if we don't procrastinate, as you say, and if we work on what we believe, the universe will conspire, in a way to give us or to help us, because I don't know. I believe in that. Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, I don't think sometimes bad things happen, and it's kind of like,
Sure.
I don't think it necessarily happened for a reason, but you can look at it and try and learn the lesson from it or gain something from it out of it, even if it's just
There
how
is
to,
always even at 1% that you can gain from, you know.
yeah, and
Yeah,
then that
I
you can
that,
make that the purpose of why that happened.
that's right.
If
So
something bad happens and you just kind of say, okay, well, I'll try and get everything out of this, even if it's just learning how to pick myself up again, and that can at least become the reason it happened. But again, it's easier said than done. So
sure, yeah, no, that's why I'm an emotional coach, you know, because I'm also working on that, and I help others to see things
yeah,
differently, right, and see and have a more open mindset to
yeah,
see things in a different way than in the common or normal way. Very good, Nick. This is very fun. I wanted to ask you as well. You know, I contacted you the first time
yeah,
because, well, I read a article from yours that
yeah,
it was about how the human brain haven't evolved so much through Homo sapiens, like 300,000 years ago,
yeah, yeah,
and then the Great Leap happened 65,000 years ago, which is basically when they had this invention of so many tools and all these creations of, you know, like a great leap. Everything, or the conclusion of that article was that, you know, the human mind didn't evolve so much. However, what evolved was the cultures, right, and the network effect, and how people
yeah,
collaborate, and
yeah.
that bring us all these new tools and creativity, and we can experience that, and we can see this maybe in the last few years about technology as well, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. I guess the argument would be that there's, this kind of carries over from the idea in the internet of network effects. That as you add more nodes to a network, its power increases exponentially.
Mm,
So you go from 10 nodes to 20 nodes. It's not twice the network. It can be 100 times the network. And so as human populations increased, as humans spread out over the world, there are more and more people inventing more things, sharing more ideas, sharing more culture. You know, more ideas are generated. And that
mm,
allows human population to increase still further. So even more generations. It kind of creates like a feedback loop where technology promotes population growth promotes technology. And I think that's a lot of what's happened in the past few tens of thousands of years. But people are not vastly smarter today than they were 100 or 200,000 years ago, probably.
mm. That's nice. That's very nice. So basically, the lesson learned from there is that we can create more and grow exponentially further if we collaborate and we combine efforts and powers and
It's all about a big
energy.
LinkedIn network. I don't know.
Is the worth of your network, the network
Well,
effect, right?
I'm coming around to it. Like one of my colleagues, I my philosophy on science has always been publish or perish. Get papers, papers, papers.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes kind of competitive about it, and sometimes impatient with people and things like that. And one of my colleagues, he had a very different view, and he says science is all about relationships. I'm like, that's kind of touchy feely, man. I've discovered as going through some ups and downs in my career that it is, relationships are super important. And
Mm,
so in
it
recent
is.
years, I've kind of adjusted things. I've really kind of doubled down on. So I mean, again, it's not just about the number of LinkedIn connections you have, but like it's about
Sure.
strong connections. It's about
Yes, meaningful
people,
relationships. Yeah.
meaningful people who spark your creativity, people who give you great ideas, people who collaborate with you, people who will, cheer you up when you're down, people who get your back in a fight. And it's those strong links. And so, I mean, there's partly the size of your network is important, but also the quality of the links within it.
Mm,
And
what
those
is
are
that?
relationships. But I mean, and so relationships are important, but not in a shallow networky kind of way, like, hi, how are you doing? But like, people you can work with and trust, a good relationship will pay itself back many times over. And the payback is often delayed by 5 years, 10 years, many years down the road. But so I mean, these days when I go to a conference, it's less about having fun out over beers. Well, that's fun, is to chat with people and BS. But I feel like if you can walk away from a conference with one good collaborator arising from that, you've done well. If you meet one person at a conference that you can still work with in 5 or 10 years,
Hmm.
um, that's a win. And
Hmm.
so I think like I
Yeah, we don't need so many people, right? Because at the end we also are limited with our time and with the people that
yeah,
we can
yeah,
spend meaningful relationships, right? So
yeah, sure,
that's
yeah,
good.
exactly.
And the less is more. I like this philosophy for me.
Yeah,
I try to apply. Very good. Thank you so much. So, as you know, this is a channel that is done for startups and entrepreneurs.
yeah,
And the idea is to redefine the business mindset. So, I wanted to ask you, what is your opinion of how global, let's say, corporations are working nowadays, and how we can change or redefine the business mindset in order to be more collaborative, or whatever you think is necessary?
yeah. Boy, I don't know how to change corporations or
It's
um,
cultural stuff, right? Yeah, so you study things about culture, yeah. You
yeah,
study the
yeah,
tribes in Africa, and you have seen also the
yeah,
human evolution, and you probably kind of have seen some patterns, right, in relation of how they lived before, and how we are living now, and how our environment has changed so much, and how this could have
yeah.
affected our behaviors.
So I mean, the thing is that like these corporations are kind of unlike anything that's existed in human history. You have some these giants like Apple or Amazon, and they've got
Hmm.
thousands of employees, huge amounts of money, resources, networks of other corporations, and how much prehistory tells us about these things. I mean, honestly, I mean, they can do phenomenal good. They can also do great damage. They're kind of like they're incredibly powerful entities, and it kind of
Hmm.
terrifies me sometimes. Is our
Totally, yeah.
institutions?
And now that they are run by artificial intelligence,
Yeah, I
that will
mean,
even worse.
basically, you could. I mean, what is it? Is it? I think is it Bridgewater Capital or something? They've got to. They kind of try to operationalize and create this set of rules, and the computer tells you how to do everything. Do you become like that? I mean, our institutions are. It's a big question. I think the challenge is
Yes.
we have to be very careful of. We want a world in which our institutions serve us, the members of the institutions, but also the broader world, rather than we serving the institutions. And
That's good.
whether it's corporations, universities, political parties, whatever, and we there can be a great danger of institutions, let's say the Soviet Union or whatever the heck, or the Nazi party that don't serve the interests of their members.
Mhm.
And how do you create when these big organizations dominate things? I mean, in terms of like applying like the lessons of hunter-gatherer societies, I see that operating more kind of like the local level. Like, how do you deal with people? And I think, or well, maybe it does kind of speak to the larger issue, which is that I mean, I see humans as we
Mhm.
haven't evolved, right? Like we're still our instincts are to a large degree still those of hunter-gatherers from 10,000 years ago. Until 10,000 years ago, everyone was a hunter-gatherer. We chased antelope and mammoths. We gathered tubers and baobab, and everyone did that. And that's kind of how we're wired. And we've completely changed our surroundings. We live inside in houses and skyscrapers, and we fly in airplanes, and we work on keyboards and all this stuff. But the hardware hasn't changed. And I call this and it's sort of like I call it the caveman mind. That
Yes.
genetically we're still cavemen. Our brains are the brains of cavemen, and they're wired to interpret the world in a very different way. And so it's kind of like if you think of like cats, for example, you shine a laser pointer and the cat chases it. Why is that? Well, a cat's a predator. It's designed, it's evolved to chase small things. So it's still acting like a wild animal. Or why do dogs chase cars? Where they're adapted to chase down large animals. They like to chase things. And we, in the same way, we are evolved to behave in our instinctive behavioral patterns are fashioned in the ice age for an ice age existence of hunting and gathering, and it doesn't necessarily work in this environment very well, and it creates a lot of problems.
Uh,
And I guess if I had to think of, I guess more broadly beyond just say corporations, society,
yes, society. That's fine.
what
Yeah,
does
definitely.
And some of that just might be, okay, we need a lot of exercise. We're evolved to walk like 10 or 15 miles a day hunting. We need a lot of exercise. So maybe the society of the future, one of the things I think it needs is people outside in green spaces getting a lot of exercise. But we're also evolved to be highly social, to be around people all the time. So I think that society of the future needs more in-person contact. What else? This is a little more complicated, but we evolved in societies that had probably high levels of intertribal warfare. We're evolved for conflict. I'm not saying that's a good thing, far from it. I'm just saying we tend to instinctively see other people as threats. We tend to create conflict where we don't need to, and these instincts need to be checked.
Do you mean like we could use that primitive, let's say, wiring that we may had before about conflicts, like, and work on it in a more healthy manner? Like we can do better conflict management, and in terms of collaboration.
I'm not quite sure what to do with it, to be honest. And like the trick is like, okay, I guess the way I see this manifesting is in tribalism. And where you often see this tribalism manifest is in politics, is some guy comes in and says, hey, look, there's these people, they're not from around here, and they're coming to take our land, they're coming to take our jobs, and they're coming to take your women, all that stuff, and they're murderers. And and we see this happen, but here's the trick is 10,000 years ago, that was a pretty reasonable way to look at the world. The tribe over the hill, if you weren't careful, they would come and take your land. They would take your jobs in terms of they would hunt the meat you're hunting. They would take the nuts that you're harvesting, and your children would starve as a result. And they were an existential threat. And so we tend to form tribes in part. One of the ways that a tribe would define itself is by reference to outgroups and fear of outgroups. And this fear of outsiders, I would argue, was rational in the Stone Age. And you would have been crazy not to be at least slightly worried about the tribe over the hill, because there was never enough food to go around, or maybe there would be for a while, but then there was a food shortage and you guys are in conflict over land. So there's a lot of intertribal warfare, and it was reasonable. And I'm not saying people never collaborated or never, made friends or peace treaties or anything like that, but there was conflict, and we tend to see the world in that way. And now it tends
do you think, Nick, that kind of environment serve us or limit us in a way? Do you know what I mean?
Well, you could make,
because in a way we are protecting, we are worrying about things that it could be solved in better ways, maybe. I don't know.
I guess the trick is, I see this tribal instinct manifest itself in things like, religious conflict, racism, xenophobia, just the other political party, and the tendency to demonize the guys on the other side of the political. And so it's like the irony is that we're probably in this position. Again, we're at an extraordinarily privileged point in our existence where we can grow enough food to feed everybody. Not everybody is going to be as rich as Elon Musk, but we have a lot of wealth that we can, and people are wealthier than any point in human history. So why is it when things are so good that suddenly there's all this conflict? And I don't know. And I think that's one of the great challenges we face going forward, is manifesting this tribalism. More generally, to zoom out away from tribalism, more generally, we evolved in a very high threat environment. And so, for example, I went for a walk on the beach in Africa, and I just wanted to walk up the beach and see this point, maybe see some cool driftwood or, seashells or something. Yes. But I waited too long. I did it kind of late in the day. And so as I'm walking up the beach, it's getting dimmer and dimmer, and I'm in this national park, and I'm realizing, there's lions out there. What the hell am I doing? And this is like, I should head back the other way. And I start looking for pointy sticks, and all I can find is these kind of flimsy reeds. They're long, but they're quite they're not going to. And it's like, oh my God, I'm breakfast. And earlier in the day, I'd seen a huge lion footprint in the sand just a couple miles away from the campsite. So I know there's lions out there. It's a dangerous environment. You need to be careful. So the point is, we evolved in a high threat environment. One of them was the threat of other humans. One of them was the threat of predators. One of them was the threat of starvation. So we evolved to be afraid all the time because we had to be. Because if you weren't afraid, you'd get eaten by a lion, you get killed by a guy from the other tribe, you starved to death. You had to worry about this stuff. Today, we
Yeah.
live in a world of extraordinary abundance and opportunities, but we're afraid of everything all the time. We're terrified.
It is the
And
primitive mindset, right?
it's a
Of
primitive
the
mindset. We think we're in a high threat environment, and yet
because we exaggerate things. Yeah, it's how we are reactive in that sense, right?
we're
It's
reactive.
how we
And
see.
so
We are reacting all the
because
time.
I'm not saying live without fear, go do anything. You have to be careful of those things that, there's
We
the
need to be, yeah, and that's also my mission, because and that's the thing. We need to be more aware and conscious about what's happening
there's the
unconsciously, right?
survivable
And
risks.
subconsciously.
There's survivable risks and the risks that are not survivable. There's the things that if they go wrong, they have a small but real chance of killing you. Don't do those. And that's like crossing the street without looking. It
Sure,
takes
sure.
2 seconds. Look, and don't get hit by a car. But there's the things that are quite survivable. And if you're in if you're in a meeting with your company and you're debating whether to speak up and say what you think about something or put your idea out there and get it shot down, well, you're going to survive that. It's a minor amount of embarrassment.
Yes.
To speak your opinion on a political matter, or to throw your idea out there, or to speculate on some scientific hypothesis. It's survivable, and so
Definitely.
I think we let those things, the survivable risks, we let those fears rule us far too much.
Hmm.
But we still need
They
to,
are our biggest limitator, I think. This primitive mindset, without doubt.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think because, as you say, our brain haven't evolved so much. That's why I like so much your article. But our environment has changed so dramatically
yeah,
and
yeah,
significantly that our brain, our mindset hasn't adapted to this new environment, because in human history and human evolution, our
yeah.
period of time that we live in is very minor. It's very small.
Yeah. I've put this into practice. Like, everybody's, in the middle of the pandemic, when we were going into the second lockdown in the UK and people are kind of freaking out. I'm like, well, the heck with this. I'm going to Africa. And it might seem like the craziest thing to do in the middle of a pandemic. And so, like, I was looking at
I
the
think it's
cases.
maybe it's probably the smartest thing you can do.
I was looking at the epidemiology, and it wasn't really spreading there very much. And there was a ton of it in the UK. And I'm like, well, where am I more likely to catch it? And everyone's like, oh, Africa. But Africa's not that dangerous.
For
It's a
sure.
pretty safe place. And the odds of something bad happening in Africa were not vastly higher than the US or UK or something. So it's like, was I really in that much more danger? Arguably a lot less danger in Africa because I was outside all the time where you couldn't really catch the virus.
Uh-huh.
So it's instinctively you want to stick close to home when you're under a situation where you're under threat. And I was like, well, am I actually safer in the UK? And so I just flew off there and had a couple of really amazing months seeing the world. And I mean, it wasn't entirely safe. There was a lion on the beach. It could have gotten me eaten, but I figured,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
Very interesting. Nick, thank you so much for your time. Unfortunately, we are at the end of the interview. So I just wanted to ask you a last quick question,
Yeah.
which is, what is the last impactful message that will you leave to entrepreneurs and startups based on all these conversations and discussions that we had?
Oh man. So to startups, you said, or
Start as entrepreneurs, people
yeah.
who want to change things, or who wants to create newer things to redefine the
Yeah.
business mindset.
I was reading this thing about how to do good science, and this also comes back to something I was thinking about in terms of like if not now when. It
Mm-hmm.
takes a bit of courage, and so one way it might not seem super courageous, but like in terms of the if not now when was I started throwing out some of the ideas like these articles I've been writing. And before I would have been like, oh, well, what if I'm wrong? What if people think it's dumb? And I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to stick my neck out and say, this is what I think. And maybe I'm wrong. But you kind of you got to take a few chances. And again, you want to
Mm-hmm.
take survival risks. But having someone think your article is stupid or being wrong about something is a survival risk. And, and again, like, the worst, hey, starting a company is these days it's a low risk. I mean, I'm not saying
Yeah.
if you
It's
go
much
bankrupt.
easier, and the risk is lower, and the investment required is lower. Everything is much
you're probably not going to die. It's not like, again, in
Definitely,
hunter-gatherer
definitely.
days, if
Yeah,
you struck out the next valley and you got killed by a lion, it's a game over. But I
yeah.
mean, bankruptcy would suck and it would be embarrassing and you'd probably hate life for a long time, but you wouldn't die. So
And
it's the
actually, the things that you learn from those experiences, I think, are
well, there you go.
invaluable.
Yeah,
Right? They are very valuable. Those lessons learned that when we
survivable
fail.
failures,
Yeah.
survivable failures are educational.
All right. Thank you so much. The courage. I like this courage thing. Thank you, Nick. That's it. Thanks so much for your time. It was a big pleasure.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was lovely to meet you as well again. So,
Yeah.
yeah, keep in touch. We'll talk soon. Thank you,
Okay.
Nick.
Sounds good.
Ciao. Ciao. See you.